Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. We are going to get started in just a bit. So I am Rebecca Quinn with the Brain Injury Network, and we are happy today to host Joy. And I can't remember your last name. I would have it in front of me, but I can't.
Tandberg.
Tandberg, there we go. It's right on the screen. So to host Joy Tandberg with Dak-Minn Driving and Home Evaluations today to talk about driving after brain injury. So just a few housekeeping issues before I pass it on to Joy. We will the slides and the video recording will be on the website, usually by Friday afternoon. Those are up there on the website. And then just to kind of promote some of our future upcoming webinar Wednesdays, we have this one today, and then July 13th, we have Bumped His Head and Went to Bed, which will be coming up as a true story about of a woman who's written a short story about a storybook for adults about concussions and playing football and then growing up. So it's kind of a neat story. So we'll be hosting that July 13th. Then July 27th, we have High Plains Fair Housing coming up to talk about fair housing available in North Dakota and options. And then August 10th, we have Lit Up My Mind, and from Laura Lotry, who is a brain injury survivor from Colorado, and has developed some resources and a website. And then on August 24th, we will have a highlight of different North Dakota programs out of the Behavioral Health Division will be coming up. And then on September 21st, we'll be Saving Shannon, a family strength and devotion. So I'm going to go ahead and remind you guys and put the link to those in our chat. But other than that, I'm going to turn it over to Joy Tandberg with Dak-Minn Driving Home Evaluation. So I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, great. Well, welcome everybody. I'd be curious to know what everyone's background is. So do we have social work, OT, PT, doctors, nurses, survivors? Excellent. I see a couple social workers. That's awesome. So
yeah, and then I'm a social worker as well. So you have 4 social workers on today, and then Carly is educator. So
that's awesome. Well, I want to start out. See, I think I'm already am having a problem. Nope, I guess the objectives for today is just kind of discussing what the role of occupational therapy is with the task of driving, how important it is to work with driving rehab specialists, and discussing the impact of illness and injury on the ability to safely drive, and then just to let everyone know what kind of services are available and how to access them. So, first off, what does driving mean to all of you? And you can unmute yourselves if you want to and just pop in or chat, whatever. So when I say driving, what does that mean? So usually the answers I get are independence. Yep, there you go. Independence, freedom, spontaneity, being able to just hop in the car. I bet every one of us, if we decide we're out of milk or eggs, we just hop in the car and go to the store. Or it's a great day out, I'm just going to go out to the lake and see what's going on. But to a lot of people, they don't have that option. So that's kind of where this all comes from. And then my other question, just to kind of get a feel, do you remember what your first car was? And this is probably not going to be quite as fun as with some of the other groups that I present to, because most of them have more elderly people. 1986 Toyota Corolla, 1996 Monte Carlo, oh, I like the cherry red, and a 72 VW Bug, 78 Dodge Fury, 98 Oldsmobile. Good. So most of these are a little bit older, and I would venture to guess that every one of them has a backup camera, lane departure, front end collision. You know, the cars nowadays are very well equipped, but back in the older generation, like myself, we didn't have any of that. In fact, I grew up, there weren't even seat belts in the cars. So, oh, I love this. I don't know if everybody can see that. I had to start the VW with a screwdriver because it didn't have a key. That sounds like some of the things that I drove. But yeah, nowadays, there's so many more safety features involved in vehicles. But and for most people, that's fine. That's great. But there are some people, and it could be people with a traumatic brain injury, could be someone with dementia. But some of those extra bells and whistles can be more confusing because you go to back up and all of a sudden the car starts beeping. And what do? It's like, what is that? What's going on? So in a way, some of these things can be more hazardous than helpful. So anyway, that's just kind of my little break the ice thing. So my journey, who am I? I am an occupational therapist. I graduated from UND in 1984, which I hear some of you hadn't even gotten into high school at that point, and maybe some of you weren't even born. So it puts me in a different category than a lot of people. But so I graduated from UND, and I was one of those individuals that had a desire to break out and move away from North Dakota, try my wings somewhere. So I've spent most of my career in Colorado and South Dakota and Idaho. In 2018, decided to move back to North Dakota because my mom was getting older. She's now 95, living in assisted living and doing very, very well. So my husband was willing to take the plunge and come up to the cold country. He is a Colorado native, so it's been kind of an adjustment for him. But when I moved back to North Dakota, I started working at Alltrue. And the first week I was there, second week I was there, I was told I would be taking over the driving program. And I went, okay, what kind of training do I get? Oh, the other therapist will train you. And I was like, wait a minute, that's not quite how something like that should work. But that's how it proceeded, and had a great mentor through Alltrue. She was amazing, but she didn't want to do the driving program either. So I did take it on, but I also took on the responsibility of educating myself, simply because my thoughts are, I can do anything. That's what I've been told by a manager at one point, is you're an OT, you can do anything. Sure, I can, but can I do it well? And that was my concern with starting something new like that, is I want to do it well. I want to do the best job that I can. I want to provide the best service possible to that client. And so I started out educating, going to all types of different conferences and education courses and such. And I started working with a mentor who's been in the driving field for over 20 years. She's out on the East Coast. And as we talked and worked together, it kind of came into the conversation. It's like, well, why don't you do this for yourself? You'd have a lot more flexibility. And kind of in that same vein, every time I got a driving evaluation order, either the client or the family would give me a call and say, so Dad's not going to have to drive in Grand Forks, is he? Because he would never drive in Grand Forks. Unfortunately, and in a hospital setting, and in this day and age, and all of you are healthcare providers, but the productivity is such a huge thing. And to drive 2 hours to Carrington, North Dakota, or someplace else is just not very feasible for a hospital to do that, because that's obviously a lot of downtime. So this started putting the things in the works, and about a year ago, I started active driving and home evaluations. I am the only mobile driving evaluator in the state. So I will go to the patient's home community, either their home, or I have met at the person's church or senior citizen center or something like that, but they're in their home environment, which is good. Currently, Sanford and Fargo and Sanford and Bismarck both have certified driving rehab specialists. There's one in each facility. And then I'm the only driving rehab specialist. Altru does still have a program where they do some driving evaluations. Very, very low tech, more low tech than what Sanford or myself have. So they're really great at being able to do the screening. They do some behind the wheel testing at Altru, but it's not very involved. The therapists that are doing that right now are great. They're amazing. So that's kind of where I came to be doing this. So we've talked about the freedom and the independence that driving gives us. So when we lose that ability to drive, that relates to a decreased return to work. It causes some vocational instability because that person is not able to get to their job. Decreased participation in social roles and community reentry. So somebody's lost the ability to drive, and what happens? They sit in their house, they watch soap operas, and they're just not getting out and participating. They're not being involved in other activities. So that then also leads to increased depression, loss of their personal identity, all of those kinds of things. And it's amazing. Those of us that have the ability to just hop in the car, we take it for granted. Just like as an OT, we do a lot with self-care and dressing and bathing. Every one of us takes it for granted that we're able to stand up, put one foot in one leg of the pants, the other foot in the other leg, and pull them up, and off we go. That's not the case for everybody. Those simple tasks that we take for granted can be such a struggle for a lot of people. And that includes someone with a traumatic brain injury. So along with the TBI, some of the things that make it difficult to do everyday things: selective and divided attention, memory, information processing slows way down, reaction time, decision making, all those kinds of things. They have a problem with executive functioning, so their inhibition is not quite as good. Their ability to plan or do abstract reasoning has decreased or been eliminated altogether. And we all know that someone with a TBI may have poor insight or judgment, just like someone with dementia may have poor judgment, poor insight, that kind of thing. So sometimes someone with a TBI or someone else might be feeling like they're on the road and they're driving in fog, or something just doesn't seem quite right. It's like, I know that I kind of lost it. Some people might feel like they're just lost in the desert, or stuck in this muck and mire, not being able to do what they want to do. Sometimes with the TBI and some of the visual things, there might be just way too much visual or auditory stimulation that can cause some increased stress, increased frustration, increased difficulty with just dealing with the situation in general. So just some statistics. This came from the National Safety Council in 2020. And in just that year, there were over 42,000 deaths resulting from motor vehicle accidents, $4.8 million in medically consulted injuries, which means people that actually were in a motor vehicle accident and sought medical treatment. So that was 48 million people that went in to see the doctor at a cost of over $470 billion. This is all 1 year. So those numbers are pretty staggering to me, which until I started pulling up some of that, I was shocked when I saw those numbers. Now, this study was a little bit older. It was in 2014. Schultheiss and Whipple. And their study back then stated that there were 1.4 million Americans that suffer from a traumatic brain injury each year. And nearly 2% of the TBI population require help with their ADLs, bathing, dressing, money management, homemaking, whatever that might be. And the ability to return to driving, as we all can identify with, is one of the most important aspects of quality of life. After brain injury, after any other kind of medical change in their history. 50-70% of adults with TBI, either moderate to severe, return to driving after an injury, but about 2/3 of those returned without having a formal driving assessment. And for those of you that work with people with traumatic brain injury, and I would venture to guess that you can probably pinpoint some of those clients where you're going, I'm not sure this is safe for them to be doing that, and so that might be someone who really would benefit from a formal driving evaluation. Some of the other things that can lead to situations on the road, fatigue. This one's a big one. Inability to appreciate or understand the consequences of something that may happen when they're behind the wheel. And emotional liability. People are impulsive. They have increased anxiety, irritability, apathy. So many things. And the list could go on and on. I'm sure you guys could probably add some to it as well. And that brings me to, if people have questions while I'm going, please don't hesitate to stop and ask them. Put it in the chat or unmute yourselves and just ask. That'd be great. So I've had a brain injury. What happens now? What can I do? As an OT and any occupational therapist, and I believe any healthcare professional in general, really believe that community mobility is a critical aspect of our overall physical and emotional health. We talked about it earlier that if you can't drive and you can't get out to do the things that you want to do, so many people just end up sitting at home and doing nothing. So the depression increases, their anxiety increases, their physical abilities decline rapidly. But the most common form of community mobility is driving. And driving is also the most complex form of community mobility. There's a lot of inherent dangers with being behind the wheel of a car. So a lot of things go into being able to safely drive. A lot of our physical being. Some of the skills that are needed are vision. Obviously, you need to be able to see if you're going to be operating a motor vehicle. Cognition. If you can't make decisions, if you can't problem solve or process what's happening around you, you're not going to be safe behind the wheel. Motor skills. Do you have the range of motion and the strength to bring your arms up and hold on to the steering wheel while you're driving? Do you have the range of motion in your hip and knee and ankle to move your foot from the gas to the brake? Do you have the endurance to drive from Grand Forks to Thompson even, or even across town to go to the grocery store? Reaction time. So that is not just the ability to go from the gas to the brake, but how quickly can you do that? And that comes into our cognition and our vision. As when you see something happening, how long does it take to process what it is, what you need to do, and then actually act on that? So if you're driving in Grand Forks or Fargo, whatever, and a kid comes running out between two cars, how quickly are you able to process what's happening and react? Or are you slow in that respect and you've caused an accident? Or if you're driving in the country in North Dakota and a deer comes out from the ditch, again, how quickly are you able to react and respond to that? Activities of daily living. Those are our basics. You know, are you able to, are you able to make a simple sandwich? Are you able to brush your teeth, get dressed by yourself, take your own shower? If a person has difficulty completing those types of tasks, chances are they're also going to have some difficulty with operating a motor vehicle. Sensation. And this goes to a couple different things. Do you have neuropathy in your feet so that you can't feel your foot on the gas or the brake? So if you have to put the brake on, can you feel that you're actually hitting the brake, or is your foot going between the pedals? And then the same thing with coordination. Do you have the coordination in your feet to move from the brake to the gas? Do you have the coordination in your hands or the sensation in your hands to be able to take your hand from the steering wheel and go to the blinker or to the windshield wipers or that kind of thing? Do you feel it when you go to touch that blinker? Some people don't even feel that. And so those are all some of those basic things that are inherently important for us to be able to safely operate that car. So with a lot of my patients or clients, however you want to call it, I use this fun little VW bug. A colleague of mine from Australia developed this, and it's an actual puzzle. So I take out the puzzle, and the car is made up of all those different parts of our body that cause us to function. So the physical aspect, the strength, our processing speed, all those things. And what I will talk to a patient about is how that relates to being in a car. So I might take that little piece that says vision, that window or windshield, and I'll ask the person, if your windshield is broken, can you still drive the car? And the answer is yes, but it's not going to be as safe, and it's not going to be as comfortable, and it's not wise. Same thing with that front tire. It says reaction speed. So I take out, or going back to the vision, I'm sorry. Same thing if we have some visual deficits. Doesn't necessarily mean we can't drive, but it may not be as safe. So we need to make some accommodations for that. Then I'll take out the tire maybe and ask the client, if you have a flat tire, can you still drive your car? Again, the answer is yes, but you shouldn't, because it's not as safe. You don't have as good a control of the car. It's not good for the car. So any number of those things. And it's the same thing if we have slower reaction time. It doesn't necessarily mean we can't drive, but we have to be ultra aware of what our limitations are and how that relates to our safety behind the wheel. Any questions at this point? Nope. Okay.
I really love that graphic though. I think that would even be helpful for like explaining to people about the importance of an assessment.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think so too. It's just when she developed this and sent it out to the other driving rehab specialists, it's like, yeah, can I use that? It was great. I wish I had that kind of visionary abilities, because it's one of the best things that I've found that I can use with my clients to help explain what's happening. So that's really good. So moving on, what is the benefit of working with an occupational therapist, driving rehab specialist versus a typical driving school? You know, we all know that the driving schools exist and they work mainly with novice drivers. So they're teaching somebody how to drive. That is not what I do. I only work with previously licensed drivers that have had a medical change in their status. And I was talking with one of the driving schools, and I won't name the one, but we were talking about medical changes. And the guy said, oh yeah, I work with that stuff all the time. I went, oh, okay, great. I said, what kinds of diagnoses have you worked with? Well, I really remember this guy that had an amputation of his leg. I'm like, okay, right leg, left. Oh, it was his right leg. I'm like, okay, so what kind of training did you do with him? Oh, I taught him how to use his left foot. I'm like, oh, with the left foot accelerator? Oh, no, you don't need anything like that. You can just reach over and use it with the standard equipment and use your left foot on the regular brake or gas. And do any of you see a problem with that? Yeah, it might be a very good short-term solution. You know, you have a fracture in your right foot and you can't use the cast on the brake or the gas. That might be good for a very short-term thing. But long-term, doing something like that is going to cause a whole lot of other musculoskeletal problems. It can be a problem with the ankle, the knee, the hip, the back. It's just this whole domino effect that's going to happen. So the issue with the driving school is 9 times out of 10, the person that is teaching doesn't have that medical background. And so when we're dealing with a TBI or a stroke or dementia or an amputation, whatever it might be, there are certain nuances that you have to be familiar with, and you have to know what kind of modifications are going to be most appropriate. So I highly recommend, if you have family members or friends or clients that are having some issues, that's the point where they need to be seeing a specialist and not going to directly to just a driving school. In terms of driving rehab specialists, most of them are occupational therapists. There are a few physical therapists. There's a few speech therapists. There are some athletic trainers. There's some social workers. So there are other professions that can be driving rehab specialists, but for the most part, it's going to be an occupational therapist. And then it's broken down again into the generalist and the specialist when it comes to driving. So the OT generalist, that could be an OT that works just as a all-encompassing. They might see every diagnosis. They might see pediatrics and adults. They might see orthopedic or neuro or whatever. But the generalist can use how that person is functioning with their ADLs and their IADLs, and they can use some screening tools to assess the driving risk with that individual. And as healthcare providers, I think we have an inherent responsibility to address driving. We need to address community mobility, however that looks to the client. So that OT, when they get that first patient, they get their patient, they're doing their evaluation, that should be something that is talked about, at least in general, to start with. And that person, that generalist OT, might be the one that first contacts the physician and says, you know, Rebecca wants to go back to driving after her head injury, but I have some concerns with that at this point. When it's appropriate, can we get her referred to Joy so that she can do a full comprehensive eval and see if that's appropriate? Now, would I want to come in right away when the person is first getting rehab? Absolutely not, because I want that person to try to get as good a functioning as they can before we go into the evaluation. So the OT, the PT, the speech, whatever that is working with them in their rehab, they're going to continue working until they get to a point where they think, you know what, this person is ready. We need to see what their abilities are. And so if it's something like that where they're thinking, I think they might be able to, but I'm not sure, that's when they refer to me. If they're working with somebody and it's pretty blatant that this person has absolutely no impulse control, they can't problem solve, they can't multitask, they can't do anything, then that might be a point in time where the OT generalist would recommend a retirement for driving. So not every client that is seen has to be seen for by a driving rehab specialist. You know, that's where the other people working on the team can work on making some of those decisions as well. So the right driver rehab specialist has gained that advanced training, and we've done hands-on mentorship in driving rehab vehicles. And the driving rehab vehicle, basically, we have an instructor brake like they would in the driving school. So we have a little bit of control, but we may also have a series of different adaptive equipment, and I'll talk about that later. But as a driving rehab specialist, we use other screening tools. We do behind the wheel evaluations, whatever it takes to determine this person's fitness to drive. And we may recommend that, yes, they can continue to drive without any restrictions, without any equipment, whatever. Or once we do our evaluation, it might be, I think this person could gain more function with continued rehab. So I might see the person and go, you know, I think I want to refer them back to OT, PT, speech, the eye doctor, whatever other specialist there is, to see if we can improve on some of these deficit areas before we make that final recommendation. So it's a team all the way. So what's involved in the comprehensive driving eval? First off, I'm going to be getting a referral from somebody. And a lot of times the family might call me themselves. The therapist working with the client might call. The doctor themselves have called. So it just really depends. But I do function only under a prescription from the physician. So prior to being able to do anything, I do need the prescription. I do need medical reports so that I have a pretty good idea what I'm dealing with. And then there's intake paperwork that has to be filled out, just like every other medical place. You can't go to the dentist without filling out your paperwork. So we get that all taken care of. And then we schedule. I try to do both the clinical and the behind the wheel the same day if possible. When I do the clinical assessment, I like to have at least one family member available that can help to clarify some of the things, because the first thing I ask the person when we sit down is, why am I here? What is the reason for me doing this evaluation today? And I would say 90% of the time, the answer is, my kids or my doctor don't think I should drive anymore. But I have a perfect driving record. I don't have any problems. I'm a great driver. And the family, I think of one particular person in general, that one daughter was with him. And when he said, my kids don't want me to drive, the one that was there said, oh, now that's not true. My sister is the one that started this. I don't have a problem with his driving. I think he's fine. So I said, well, this is going to reinforce one or the other. And we went through the eval, and I watched her face. You could just see everything falling as she was going, oh my gosh. She got up and walked away several times, dried her tears, came back and sat down. And at the end, she said, I had absolutely no idea that he was that bad. And he did so poorly with everything that I did not take him in the wheel or behind the wheel. I could not justify even doing that part of the assessment. So in that clinical part, I look at their medical history. I look at their driving history. Have they had any fender benders or accidents? Do they have they had warnings or tickets, that kind of thing? And then I might ask the family, have you noticed scratches on the car that nobody knows how they got there? Or is there a dent in the mailbox? Or any of these other little warning signs? I also look at their physical status. What is their range of motion, their strength, their coordination? I do a lot of cognitive testing, and that could be with a variety of different cognitive tests. I listed some there, but there are others that can be used. I also look at their vision. So the things that I screen are acuity, which is our distance vision, peripheral vision, peripheral fields, and that's how far you can see out to the side without turning your head. And I also look at contrast sensitivity. And the easiest way that I explain that to my clients is, right now where it's summertime and it's lush and green, we have green grass, we have green trees, green bushes, whatever. It's beautiful. But we also have green street signs. And so contrast sensitivity relates to being able to read that green street sign with that green tree foliage in the background. Or in the winter in North Dakota, when we've had snow and everything is white, it's a lot harder to tell where is the edge of the road. And that's contrast sensitivity, being able to pick up those things. And then one of the other things that I look at in the clinical part of the evaluation is their reaction time. So I have a machine that we work on reaction time and I test that. Again, so many things can happen that we need to be able to respond to quickly. So I was going to tell you about another client too, and I forgot. I didn't write it down, but those are some of the things that we look at. And I don't look at one of those things in and of itself. So they might not score as great on some of the cognitive things, but they're not down in the basement with it either. But they might also have some physical things. That particular individual that I talked with or told you about a little bit ago, he couldn't hardly walk with his walker. He had very limited range of motion of his arms, and strength was minimal at best, but his cognitive status was really poor, along with vision and acuity, just everything together is when I made that decision that I couldn't take him in the car. There have been other clients that I've had where everything's kind of borderline. They didn't bomb out on everything, but they didn't do great either. Those individuals are the ones that I'm probably going to take out in the car. So the only times I don't take them out is if they bomb everything. But for the most part, most of my clients, we're going to go and do a behind the wheel evaluation. Sorry. And in that, we're going to drive in both familiar and unfamiliar places. I give them time to warm up in the car, get comfortable with all of the primary and secondary controls in the vehicle. I give them time to get used to the braking and the gas, because the sensitivity of those is different in every vehicle. So we do look at all of that. But once we get started, we're going to go familiar and unfamiliar areas. I'm going to try to get them lost and see if they can problem solve. How do they get back out of it? I'm looking to see how aware are they of their surroundings. Are they able to follow the rules of the road? Do they recognize the different signs? Are they paying attention to the speed limit? What's the control that they have of the vehicle? Is it a nice smooth acceleration, or is it real jerky? Do they just slam on the brakes? How do they pass? How do they merge? That kind of thing. So we will go in very low traffic areas. We do some high traffic areas. And then I also look, is this a person that's going to be holding on to their drink and their phone and their sandwich and not paying attention to this little kid running or riding their bike across the street? Can they multitask safely? So in essence, my job goes from humor. Oh my goodness, I didn't realize the stop sign was there. Oh, I know I was driving too fast, to horror. In an instant, our lives can change. And that's not just me in the car with the client. That could be anybody. That it doesn't take anything for something tragic to happen. And so I take my job very seriously. And if I say I'm not willing to take somebody in a car, it's because I'm pretty sure that something tragic could happen. So we're out there in the car, and is the person getting information overload? There are so many things happening and so much information that has to come in that they need to process. Are they able to do that? So, and can they do that safely and in a timely fashion? So we've done the clinical exam, we've done the behind the wheel. What's the next thing? We're in the car and they're going, am I going to be able to drive? So then we sit down again with a family member and have a discussion as to what happened in those first two parts of the session. And I go through, especially if the person is not doing well, and I'm recommending retirement, I go through and I talk through each one of those points that were red flags and why that relates to them being behind the wheel of the car. But I might recommend that they're able to continue driving without any restrictions at all. They're good to go. One person may be that they can continue to drive, but with some restrictions. Only drive in daylight hours, no driving during rush hour traffic, no driving in inclement weather, or just a certain radius around their home. Usually it's a 20-mile radius. So it might be some of those. Like I mentioned earlier, I may put a hold on making a decision until they can have further rehabilitation or training, either with their therapist, or if it is the person with the amputation or somebody that needs hand controls. And we do training with that equipment. Once that is all done, then we make that final decision. And sadly, there are people that I do have to recommend that they retire from driving because of their cognitive or their physical status or whatever else. But then I really stress to the family these 3 R's. Number one, removing access to the vehicle. And that can be as simple as taking away the keys or removing the vehicle completely. I had a client that I got called after several things had happened. One being the family had decided that he should not be driving anymore. So they took the keys away from him. Well, this guy has pretty severe dementia, but he knew enough that if he called the dealership, they could make him a new key. So he had a new key made and they brought it out to him. The family went, okay, well, maybe if we take the battery out of the car. So they took the battery, and he had enough problem solving that he called Napa Auto Parts and they brought him a new battery. And then it came down to, we need to get somebody else in here. And so removing access completely. And that might be, gosh, Dad, your grandson needs to go to college and he needs a vehicle. Can he use yours? And that's a more positive way to get rid of that, the vehicle. It's really important to replace those community mobility needs. So, if the person can't just hop in the car like we do, they still have places they need to go. They need to go get their hair done. They need to get to the doctor. They need to get to church. They need to grocery shop. Maybe go to senior meals, whatever that might be. So then it comes down to helping to find options for that. And it might be family and friends where you create a schedule. So every Sunday, Grandma needs to go to church. So Sally will take her to church every Sunday. And on Wednesdays at 10 o'clock, she gets her hair done. So then Sue might take her to get her hair done on Wednesdays at 10. Kind of set that up so that the person doesn't have to ask. Because I think that is hard for all of us, ask for help. And if that individual is always saying, I've got to go get my groceries or need to go get my hair cut, it's we as family and friends and loved ones need to anticipate those things ahead of time. So it might be creating that schedule. The other thing that I stress to families is you have to remember the fun. Because yes, they have to do groceries and doctor and hair and those kinds of things. But they also probably like to go for a Sunday drive and look at the crops. You know, if that person has a background in farming, they love to go and look at the crops and see what's happening. So out of the blue, it's calling up and saying, hey, Dad, you want to go out for a drive? Let's go see what the crops are doing. Or calling him up and saying, Mom, let's go for ice cream. Do you want to go to Dairy Queen? You know, add in those fun things. So it's not always just the schedule, but it's the spontaneity of things as well. We all like that. So I mentioned adaptive equipment a little bit earlier. And there are some people that do need some basic equipment. Things that don't require, or things that don't affect the operation of the vehicle are such things as, this is called a handy bar. You stick it in the latch of the door and you can help transfer with it. So you can push up on that to help get up out of that seat. There's other things that it can be used for as well, but transferring is probably the biggest reason that I would use that. A seatbelt grabber, seatbelt extender. So that's if somebody has limited motion and it's hard to reach across or reach behind to get the seatbelt. That's just a little thing that you can add on to it to make that a little easier. Some people have limitations with their fine motor coordination or their strength. So this is something that you just push down on it to release the latch of the seatbelt. And how many people have had that seatbelt fall down between the cushions? This little guy here will help to keep that up so it's easy access. Some people have difficulty transferring in and out of the vehicle. This is a swivel seat, so it helps them just kind of turn their body to get in and out easier. And this is a wider rear view mirror. All of these things that I just showed you or mentioned do not require any training. They don't require an endorsement from the state, anything. So anyone can recommend these kinds of things, just to make it easier for someone. But then there's equipment that does alter the operation of the vehicle. That stuff requires training and an endorsement from the state. So do any of you know what a spinner knob is? Anybody? Nobody grew up on a farm? Okay. So
Is that
again,
the one that goes on the tractor?
yep, exactly.
Okay. Then yeah.
Yeah, you would see them a lot on tractors.
When you said the farm piece, before that I had to put it together, but when you said that, I was like, oh yeah, like on a tractor.
Yes, a lot of people think that you can put those on any vehicle if you want to. However, it's illegal except on a farm vehicle like a combine, a tractor, swather. If you were to be stopped and you have a spinner knob or a steering device that is not standard equipment, you can get fined unless there's this little thing on your driver's license that says you have the authority to use that. So things like a left foot accelerator. This is what I was talking about with that amputation person. So this part here, do you see my cursor? Okay, this part here blocks the gas pedal. So you can't inadvertently hit the gas with your right foot. The gas pedal then gets moved over here. So you use the gas with your left and then bring your foot over to the actual brake. And so you're working in this position instead of typically from the standard gas to the brake. And there's a lever here. I don't know if you can see it, but when you push on the gas pedal that's marked there, it actually pushes the actual gas pedal downward. Okay. So that's a left foot accelerator. This lady is learning to use hand controls. So she would not be using her feet at all to drive. She would use a hand control, and that's right here. There are several different types of hand controls. With all of them, you push forward to work the brake. With this particular one, with her hand on them, I can't tell. You either push down or you rock it back towards you, or you twist. And hand controls can be placed on either side. So it can be a left hand like this or a right hand. And then you see her other hand here, her right hand is on a spinner knob. Because when you're using one hand to work the gas and the brake, you have to have an improved ability to steer that wheel. And if you've ever tried to turn a steering wheel with one hand, it's not that easy and it's not that safe. So with having that spinner knob, that helps improve their ability to turn that wheel safely. Both of these require training and that endorsement from the state. There's another type. This is an electronic controls. And again, there's a whole wide range of electronic equipment or zero effort equipment out there. Sadly, none of us in North Dakota have any of it. So there are times that I need to refer someone to like Courage Kenny, where they have the ability to have all of the specialized equipment. Those of us here in North Dakota, we all have either cars or SUVs. We do not have vans to work with the wheelchair. Now, that being said, if a person is able to transfer into a regular vehicle, they may still be able to drive because we can teach them to dismantle their wheelchair and get it in the back seat, that kind of thing. But if they need to drive from a van, then they're going to have to go someplace else, sadly. But anyway, there are all types of different adaptive equipment that can be used to get people back on the road. Again, anything that requires a modification to the vehicle and how it operates, the person would be trained, and then they have to go through a road test with the state to be sure that they are appropriate to use that, and they get an endorsement on their license. Going back a step further, if we make a recommendation for someone to have restrictions, such as no night driving or the local driving only, whatever, they also have to do a road test with the state. And then we get a license that has those restrictions on it. So anyway, those things can happen. So then what's next? With that TBI, would it be a one and done thing? I do the evaluation, I make those recommendations that, yeah, they can still drive with no restrictions. Sadly, in the case of TBI or dementia, Parkinson's, MS, stroke, whatever, those are all things that their abilities may change over time and with their aging process. So if the person starts to show some further deficits later on, like residual symptoms, daytime sleepiness, fatigue, risk of seizures, increased cognitive motor sensory deficits, sometimes these things don't show up right away. They come down later down the road. And aging adults with a history of TBI may be at an increased risk of driving accidents than the general aging population, simply because they have all these other things going on with their brain. So with any of those kinds of diagnoses that could be changing over time, or in the case of a dementia or Parkinson's, we know that's a progressive disease. As that progresses, any of those individuals should have a repeat driving evaluation. And there's no hard and fast every 6 months, every year, every 2 years. It really depends on the individual and how they're functioning. How quickly is their disease progressing? So, did that give you all just a whole lot more questions? Or did it explain everything that you need? Let's open it up for questions.
Does anybody have any questions? It was very helpful to me, especially how you kind of walk through the process. And, you know, that, like you said, it's not just a simple one and done.
Yeah, sadly, you know, there's so many individuals that we work with that we know there's going to be changes over time. Most of the time, those changes are going to be negative instead of positive. So that's really hard for people to deal with. These are just some of the resources that I used. And this is my contact information.
Christine in the chat says, great information. Thanks.
You guys are very welcome. I would love to answer any questions. I know that I couldn't have answered everything. One big question that usually comes up is, does insurance cover this? How much does it cost? That kind of thing. Insurance generally does not cover driving evaluations because Medicare, in all of their wisdom, has deemed that driving is not an essential IABL. And so if Medicare doesn't cover it, neither will anybody else. With the exception of sometimes workers' comp will, if it was an injury caused from a work-related accident. Sometimes Voc Rehab will cover, and sometimes the VA will cover. Those are really the only situations that I've seen in terms of insurance that would cover it. And those aren't always a for sure.
Now, would somebody maybe get a discount on their auto insurance if they have completed this?
Yes, that can happen. And that's usually the older population. There are some people that they just want to make sure that they're still being safe. And a lot of times insurance will give them a discount if they can prove that they've gone through an evaluation. Yes.
Any other questions?
So one quick one. Again, most people ask, how much does it cost? My comprehensive driving eval, I charge $400, and that includes it includes everything. It's 2 to 3 hours with the individual and their family. And of course, that includes all my pre-work, all the stuff that I have to do afterwards. I've been told by many people that my rates are way too low. I'm not at a point where I want to make any big changes with that yet. I do training with individuals as well for the adaptive equipment, and my training rates are $140 an hour. The other logistic is because I'm mobile, people want to know, where will I go? When I first started this, I wanted to keep my service area fairly close to where I'm at, which is I'm located halfway between Fargo and Grand Forks. So I thought, yeah, I could go out as far as like Carrington, Devils Lake, Jamestown, but I have been to Bismarck and I've been to Minot a couple times. The only problem is when I'm going that far, I have to recoup some of that time, because when I'm driving 4 hours to Minot, I can't do anything else. I can't see another client. I can't be doing paperwork. I can't be contacting the doctor. So I do have to recoup. So I have developed a fee schedule for anything over 2 hours round trip. then I have to charge extra. And I base that on a 15-minute increments. So that's kind of where that's at in terms of cost. Any other questions? Anything I'm forgetting? You are welcome to contact me at any time if you do have a question. And think about this in terms of family and friends and clients and everything. We've all been driving and see something going on and we go, oh man, that person should not be behind the wheel of a car. I would venture to guess that everybody here, even though Rebecca's face is the only one I see, I would bet everybody's kind of nodding your head going, oh yeah, I can think of 4 or 5 people right now that probably could benefit. And so if I can help, let me. I'd be more than happy to keep people going. My goal is to keep people on the road, behind the wheel, for as long as they can, provided they are safe. And that safe relates to not just them, but everybody else around. So safety is huge.
Well, thank you so much. If there are not any questions, we really, really appreciate it. You being here today and sharing this information. It's, great information. And as I said, the recording of it will, and the evaluation link to apply for CEUs will be up on usually by Friday. And then I had put in the chat and on the website for any future webinar Wednesdays that we have coming up. But we really appreciate you sharing your information with us, Joy, today. Because as I said earlier, it's a often asked question we have of individuals after brain injury of that return to driving piece.
I'm sure. Well, thank you guys for the opportunity to talk with you. Because yeah, driving is such an integral part of who we are as individuals. So
definitely awesome. Is. Thank you. We appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you guys.